Good evening, everyone. I am so pleased that you can join us tonight. I am Amy Gary, the Vice President of the Reading League chapter of Connecticut, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Antonio Fierro. Dr. Fierro is the Chief Impact Officer for Educator Preparation with the Barksdale Reading Institute out of Mississippi, and a former Texas State Teacher of the Year. He has been a member of the National Letters Cohort of Literacy Consultants led by Dr. Louisa Moats for almost 20 years. Antonio has contributed to several literacy curricula for English learners, and along with his colleague, Dr. Mary Dahlgren, co-authored Kid Lips, a curriculum that teaches articulatory features of English phonemes to young children. His areas of interest include early literacy instruction, improving the learning experience of pre-teaching candidates, and early research and practice that impacts English learners. Antonio is also dedicated to advancing the knowledge base and understanding of dyslexia and other reading disabilities, as his son Antonio Jr. has dyslexia. So I want to just hand it on over to Antonio and let him take it.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for that introduction. And by the way, my full name is Antonio Armando Fierro Nunez. All right, so try saying that 10 times real fast. And Amy, really, you did really pretty good on that. You did actually very well on the rolling of the R. I'm just telling you that much. Because if I would have asked, that was great. Because if I would have asked Don Obermeyer, I'm not sure whether I see you, Don.
I think it's important to pronounce people's names the way that they pronounce it in their home and around their family. So thank you.
You know, you did great because my two kids can't even roll the R, right? So I'm just saying that you did outstanding. An outstanding job. But yeah, you can call me Antonio or Tony. Thank you so much. Just, you know, I respond to anything. Just make it nice. That's all. So colleagues, I am the co-author of Kid Lips, and it's really interesting. As I was preparing for this session, I didn't know what to place on my as a title, because right now I am the Chief Impact Officer for Educator Preparation out of the Barksdale Reading Institute, but transitioning. Wonderful opportunity to team up with my partner in crime, Mary Dahlgren. As Amy mentioned, Mary is the other author of Kid Lips, and I will be joining her now as the Chief Academic Advisor for Tools for Reading. So we're going to have a lot of fun moving forward. I thought I was going to be in Mississippi and have that be my last chapter of my career and close it up. And now I don't even have any. I mean, now it's like a whole new book. So I'm not sure how that happened, but it happened. I'm also, so colleagues, I'm an English learner myself and have always been a word nerd of sorts. At a very young age, I became very curious about the language, and I was very, very fortunate to have also had some teachers who were language experts, in my opinion, and they really understood the structure of the language and were able to explain it to me so well that the curiosity just kept on moving and kept on growing. So anytime that I hear a new word and it just sparks some curiosity, and that's what we should be doing with all kids anyway, using words that are not common, introducing them to all the wonders of our language laboratory. And that's what I like to call what we're in. We're part of this language laboratory. But anyway, about 3 weeks ago, I was listening to a talk show, and they mentioned this word. This word right here. Look, where's this word? The word is shrinkflation. All right. So I'm sure it's a little bit older than that, but not much. And it really has to do with the current state of affairs of our current state of economic affairs here in our country. And so the anchor defined shrinkflation, and shrinkflation means that if we're going to pay the same amount for a product, but the manufacturer is going to throw in less of that item. So if we pay $8.99 for a bottle of shampoo that holds 12 ounces of shampoo, we'll still be paying $8.99, but instead of 12 ounces, now we're going to be paying we're only going to get 10 ounces. So it's kind of like a trick. You know, we still pay, but we get less. So anyway, so that's the word of the day, I guess, shrinkflation. All right. So today I want to talk about using, and I've been on this kick for quite some time, using a linguistic lens as an additional tool to monitor our teaching, to evaluate our teaching, to evaluate the learning for our English learners. Now, I was doing the math actually a couple of days ago, and this year I celebrate 30 years in education. And I'll tell you that this is probably the first time ever that we are really taking a very close look at English learners and what do we need to know about teaching English learners. And what I have been doing now for several years is really studying that cross-linguistic transference, and especially from Spanish to English, and I'll tell you why as well, why Spanish. So I want to offer that linguistic lens now for us to really evaluate what is going on with our English learners, and is it that they are actually struggling with phonology, or is it that they are processing and making comparisons and actually learning about, you know, a new level of phonology that is not common to them because of their native language, perhaps. So lots of things to consider. Colleagues, at the lower left-hand corner of this slide is my new email address, but my phone number remains constant. So if you need to reach me, if you have any questions, by all means, do so. All right, by all means, reach out. And earlier, I got on really super early, and I had the pleasure of having a conversation with some of your board members, and Nancy actually brought this to my attention. She was talking about, you know, is it an English learner, is it a multilingual learner, is it an emergent bilingual? So, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have that. And I looked, and like, I don't have that in my presentation. So I completely forgot it and added it here right before we began. So for the sake of today's session, colleagues, a student who speaks any other language other than English at home will be addressed as an English learner. All right. So I do not want to step on anybody's toes or offend anyone and say, well, that's not how we identify our English learner. Slowly, I can see the field moving to multilingual learner, and I get that as well. Okay, so for the sake of today, though, we are going to be, I'll be addressing the multilingual learner or the emergent bilingual as just English learner. So what's in the agenda? I do want to take a quick look at the national and local demographics. And also, as I was speaking to your board members, I was very pleasantly surprised to see some of the demographics that are just particular to Connecticut. I do want to talk about the linguistic lens as an adjustment and tell you where that adjustment word came from, all right? There seems to be, and this is one area that I've struggled with for probably most of my professional career, as I started as a bilingual, well, I started off as a bilingual teacher, then went on to a bilingual specialist, and we seem to be confusing the aspects of second language acquisition and reading development, and those do not develop at the same time. And many times, actually, second language acquisition throws us in the wrong direction, all right? So it gives us a false sense of confidence, and we just need to be aware of that. I do want to talk about the oldies but goodies that have existed for a long time that we need to continue as far as language development is concerned. and then finish up by doing some comparisons between phonological awareness or phonological awareness and phonetics in both English and Spanish. And I realized that there are a number or many other languages that are out there. Again, I'll tell you why Spanish is always at the forefront. One area that used to frustrate me for the longest time was that being asked, and not the part of being asked, but trying to come up with a secret formula, that silver bullet when it comes to working with English learners. And what is it that's going to impact the instruction, the delivery, the pedagogy of working with English learners? And the more that I learned, and the more that I studied linguistics, and then later on was introduced to the theoretical models of reading and Hollis Scarborough's visual metaphor to represent those sub-skills that develop over time, it became obvious that really the secret formula, or the way to understand how to work with English learners, is really lies within us. And basically, the more we know about language, the better we teach. And one of my concerns is that there is a lot of parallel when we're talking about general ed and working, preparing our teacher candidates in special ed as well, or even providing this micro-credential or a certificate in TESOL or ESL instruction. The common thread is that we're not preparing enough, we're not teaching enough of the linguistic values of our language to our teachers. And that, by knowing how language develops and knowing the difference between oral language and reading development, for example, we can better identify what is the need and how are we teaching to that need, and how do we assess or evaluate. And I'll address that in a little bit further. I want you to also keep in mind, colleagues, and I remember this from my own experiences, that our English learners are facing double the cognitive workload as other kids, as they are, or other students, as they are developing literacy skills, also, but acquiring a new language. And what I didn't place on this slide is the fact that we take each student at the level where he or she is at, and then build on that. We take it from an asset and build on those assets and keep on working on that. Also, we have to realize that the native language might also cause some dissonance, some cognitive dissonance. So we used to be very romantic about the transference of skills, and I do say it's very romantic that, oh, well, these skills, once you learn to read, for example, in native language, that transfers over. And I get that, and we want that. The situation is, if that skill does not exist in the native tongue, there is nothing that's going to transfer, all right? And so when we are teaching those elements that are very specific to English, for example, we must realize that perhaps in the child's native language, that skill does not exist, or it exists differently. Like, for example, and I will address this a little bit later, so that phoneme might exist in the native language that's very similar to English, and so that transfers over. But I'm going to show you how in Spanish, for example, the phoneme transfers, but perhaps that phoneme does not exist in a certain position. So that phoneme can be said, it's recognized, it's identical, but it's never mentioned, it's never articulated or heard in the final position of a word. So keep that globally, okay? Keep that globally. So speaking of globally, across the country, we have the most current numbers that are provided by the Institute of Education Sciences, by IES. I always follow IES because you can get numbers from all over the place, and I'm really stick to the stats that IES provides. But in fall of 2017, we had 5 million EL students that accounted for about a little over 10% of the entire student population. So, but if you take a look at that, over 17 years, that number grew from 3.8 million to 5 million. We're due another review here shortly, or another set of numbers here shortly, and those numbers are only going to be increasing. So those are the numbers that we have right now. It's significant. If I take a look at the breakdown across the country, California at over 19%, my home state of Texas at 18%, our neighbors to the west of us, New Mexico at 16%, Nevada at 17%, and you can see these darker shaded states that have 10% or more English learners. Now, I'll be honest, when as I was looking at these numbers, I thought that Connecticut would be a striped number, or maybe not striped, but the other a little bit darker shaded green. But I was pleasantly surprised that Connecticut has, 7%, according to IES, 7% of the population as ELs, right? And that's according to IES. Now, that really caused I was shocked. That was very interesting. And so I did some additional research. And so it all depends on, what you're reading. I looked at your Department of Ed stats, and depends on what paper or what document I review. That number is like anywhere between 14 and 18% of all students, and that is sizable. The other thing, though, is that I must congratulate the state of Connecticut, because then this came up. All right, the official Connecticut seal of biliteracy, and let me tell you, colleagues, that's not easy to come by. And what that says is that we have high school students who are graduating from high school bilingual and biliterate. So that is amazing. So it tells me that Connecticut is on the cusp of doing what needs to be done, what's right, but also understands the importance of biliteracy, being bilingual, being biliterate, and who can deny that? So congratulations to my friends in Connecticut. Way to go. Now, this is something else that I wanted to share with you. And I was sharing with your board members. If you would have jumped on about 45 minutes earlier, you would have heard the whole presentation, because we were already talking about it. This is very interesting to me, because as we were talking about this earlier, for the longest time we had this tendency to place all our English learners under one neat little umbrella, and that is not the case. And the more that now that comes to the surface, the more that the subject of English learners is lifted, the more that we are looking at also their background, and then of course what's the best way to instruct. And what's really interesting is that most of our English learners are actually second, third, or even fourth generation English learners. That is, so look at this, from pre-K to fifth grade, about 85% of our English learners are US citizens. And that is a big plus. Why is that? Because at home, all right, there is their native tongue that is being used, all right, that is being used for communication. And however, they're also, unless they do not communicate with anybody outside of home, are also being exposed to the phonology of English. So now I have two phonological systems that are taking off, all right? And children are able to distinguish between English and Spanish. And but now I have this very, very strong foundational area that means that even though, or although we may identify them as English learners, they already have a lot of they may have a lot of these foundational areas that allows us to start working on phonological awareness at a very young age and start moving along those lines. And it can also cause a little bit of challenges, and I'll compare that as well. Now, take a look at this from 6th to 12th grade, 62%. So that is amazing. That is amazing. However, I shouldn't really look too amazed or be too amazed, to be too surprised, because I have a nephew. His name is Axel or Axel. And it's funny because he says, oh, in my math class, they call me Axel. And then in my science class, they call me Axel. It's like, oh, okay, dude. All right, that's fine. That'll work. And he is a third generation English learner. And it's amazing how he's very verbal. And Axel is, he's in 4th grade I think he's going to 4th grade. And it is amazing how his oral language has fooled the system. And this is what I'm saying, that he communicates beautifully in both English and Spanish. It has confused us, and it has given us a false sense of security, because when it comes to reading, Axel is struggling with his reading. Why? Because he still does not own the key or have the key to decoding, and insists on trying to decode as if he were reading Spanish. And now his level of brilliance in Spanish is excellent. He can't transfer those skills because of the level because of the orthography of one being so transparent and English being so opaque. So we can talk about that also in a little bit. So colleagues, let me answer this question because I'm asked over and over again, Antonio, why is it that all your studies and all your comparisons, or everybody who's in the field, why is it that Spanish comes up over and over again when we have over 400 different languages? So this is the reason, colleagues, across the country, almost 75% of our English learners are native Spanish speakers. All right. So when you're talking about these numbers, then it is obvious why Spanish is always at the forefront, and why so many kiddos from Spanish-speaking backgrounds are targeted for studies and interventions and so forth. Check this out, though. All right, so that's 74.8%, almost 75%. These are Connecticut's numbers. All right, 72% of our English learners are native Spanish speakers, which is good to know, because I can be a little bit more targeted or know what's causing this cognitive dissonance or confusion, or making our students say, oh my gosh, I really need to think about this. And about 183 different languages. Now, what's also interesting is that in your state, you have languages that haven't made it to the national numbers. All right, so many of them being Indian in origin. And so wow, that is, so there's other items to think about as well. All right, so 72%. Again, this seal, so important, and I congratulate you. My situation here is to ensure that our instruction is based on good research, right? And there is, I'll be upfront with it. There's been some pushback across the country that the science does not apply to our English learners. And many times it has to do with a lack of understanding of what we mean by the science, right? And I can understand that, and I realize that many times our colleagues who are pushing back state that the science is all about phonics. And if you take a look at the definition of the science and the defining moment guide that was published by the Reading League at the national level, it's not a one size fits all. It's not about one program. It is about the research that has existed over really 5 decades. And so the areas of concern really for me lie in the fact that some folks do not understand yet what the science is all about, or what do we mean by structured literacy. And it's not about a phonics approach, but really understanding what is going on with reading altogether, and the best way to teach that. So this is kind of maybe I got these. There you go. All right. So I got these mixed up. So let me go here first. Are you familiar with, or have at least heard of, the report of the National Reading Panel? All right. And it's not a poll. I should have set up a poll, but just, let me know. Add it up, throw it in your chat. Yes, or just say yes or no. Are you familiar with that? So just go ahead. Yeah, great, super, cool, nice, excellent. Now I'm probably preaching to the choir here, because this is when we first really had an understanding of, really like 20 years already of the science, and we published that, and this is the area. These are the components that are supposed to be making up an effective reading program. All right, and sometimes this report kind of was misunderstood, and this is where our naysayers are saying that phonics is not the be all and end all, and I must say, phonics is not the be all and end all for any kid. All right. But understanding how the other levels work, the other components work, is also very important. But this is to me, this one is really important to me. Are you familiar with the report of the National Literacy Panel on Language Minority Children and Youth? All right. It's okay. All right. So the panel, the panel report was published in 99, 2000, the National Literacy Panel report. Well, about 6 years later, this report was published, all right, the report of the National Literacy Panel on Language Minority Children and Youth, to look at these components, and are they effective? How effective are they for our English learners? And what this report found was that, or what this report addressed, were areas of literacy development, cross-linguistic relationships. You see all these items here. And I tried to upload the executive summary to the chat. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do so. So I will go ahead and provide you with the executive summary. Colleagues, this is like a 700-page report. It could probably be used as a deadly weapon, so there's no need to purchase it. But it's great information if you want to, but I can send you an executive summary that's about 6 pages in length. And this is what additional findings it published, all right? That instruction that provides substantial coverage in those areas that were just mentioned, phonemic awareness, phonics, so forth and so on, they have clear benefits for the English learners. However, research also suggests that adjustments to these approaches are needed to have maximum benefit for English learners. And that was the key here, that adjustments needed to be made, all right? And I'm not sure that we understood what those adjustments needed to be and what they had to be. So this part is found on page 3 of the executive summary when you get it. So yes, I need all those elements. However, the adjustments have to be made. And colleagues, the best area for the adjustments to occur is actually in those components of structured literacy, those components of language. So the adjustments, we need to understand the phonology, the orthography, the syntax, the morphology, so forth and so on, those elements of language, and that's where the adjustments occur, all right? So what we hear, especially with working with English learners, is that we all learn to read the same way, and we're all accessing the same parts of our brain. And yes, that is so true, all right? That is so true. But if the native language is very transparent, all right, and English being so opaque, I get it. Yes, we all learn to read the same way, and we provide additional instruction that is very systematic, that is very explicit, that leaves nothing up to chance as we are teaching kids how to read and write. All right. Again, in such an opaque or such a morphophonemic orthographic system. Now, let me go back and compare, for example, with Spanish, and I'll show you some other examples, but in Spanish, the phonology, I mean, in Spanish, for example, I have only 22, there are only 22 phonemes, but in English, I have 44, right? I'm doubling that. And there are obviously, and some of those phonemes that do occur in both languages, they may not exist, as I mentioned earlier, in certain positions in a word, right? So there you go. One thing that we hear a lot, for example, now get this, especially with our Spanish speakers, is we have a tendency to say as stop it, or as school, or as stove, right? So what's really unique, what's really interesting is that English has tons and tons and tons of S blends, right? Like stop and spill and small and snail, and I could just go on and on and on. And Spanish does not have any S blends, period. So the S is never allowed to blend with its neighboring consonant. Never, ever, ever. That is just a rule of Spanish phonology. So what happens in Spanish is that I have to attach a vowel to the S, right? Pull it away from its neighboring consonant and form another syllable. So for example, school, escuela. So I attach a vowel to that S, pull it away so it doesn't blend with its neighboring consonant. So you're saying, but Antonio, I have other languages. Absolutely. So getting to know as much as you can about the child's native language will help also explain some of these these issues, especially when you're evaluating. All right. Okay. So I love Hollis Scarborough's rope, right? This visual metaphor. And I think this is probably the best representation for me when I'm talking about, hey, we're going to build vocabulary. And this is what I see a lot. For English learners, we do a heck of a job working on vocabulary and background knowledge. Yes, yes, yes. And we're talking about language structures. I don't think we do it explicit enough, but we do spend a lot of time here, especially here, right? We're building this vocabulary. Colleagues, the bottom line is that, and as we are working with vocabulary, and this still is very crucial. All right. So if we're working with young children, then we could almost guarantee that this is going to be worked in somehow, some way. If our English learner is in middle school or high school, it is our duty to build on vocabulary, right? We're building on vocabulary, and we're building on vocabulary. So what happens is that this area really gets worked on. And this is what happened to my nephew. Great vocabulary, but this was completely missing. All right. So it's building both and working on both together, which really means some creative scheduling, so to ensure that those foundational skills are always there. So if I think about second language acquisition, I do like to use Crafton and Terrell's work from many years ago, and you know, it's commonly cited as we're going through these stages of second language acquisition. Or Jim Cummins talks about BICS versus CALPS, all right? Basic interpersonal communication skills and academic, cognitive academic language proficiency, which is academic language, basic interpersonal communication skills, still language. But you see how this really is, we're looking at the language comprehension at the top portion of Scarborough's rope. What happened to the bottom? WIDA does some excellent, and I'm not knocking anybody. This also, the WIDA proficiency levels identify different levels of language acquisition and right on. We need to ensure that along with second language acquisition, that we look, for example, at reading development as well. So if I think about linear space of the word reading development, where is this kid? And I'm being able to identify what so the child may already be at intermediate language proficiency stage, which is right here, right? All right. So definitely not, child won't be here pre-alphabetic, but what can we do to ensure that he or she is here or here? And what kind of instruction are we talking about? And that's probably gonna be a lot of phonemic awareness, a lot of good decoding as we're building what? Vocabulary. And that is the key, that we're almost having to work, well, not almost, but having to work on both levels to ensure that they are both developing, not simultaneously. We're not gonna have the same type of progress, but they still need to have the same type of attention though, all right? So let me move on before I run out of time here. So some adjustments. So we talked about adjustments being made in those language components. These are some super just strategies and adjustments that we can make across the board that are still as effective today. And if you look at Claude Goldenberg's work and Elsa's work, Elsa Cardenas-Hagen, Sharon Vaughn and others, we're always talking about, what do we do to establish, what do we do to support language, all right? Because I need to be supporting language as I'm teaching these foundational skills as well. So routines are absolutely important. And you're going to see that these ideas or these areas of attention really are across the board. I mean, it's just good instruction. With our English learners, though, I want to make sure that realia, illustrations, graphic organizers, other visuals, right, that support that oral discourse and enhance instruction are absolutely part of the instruction. But this is also for children who have language process, limited vocabulary. It's just good instruction. We are going to be providing lots of opportunity for responses, right? For rehearsal, for repetition, a lot of I do, we do, you do, all right? Because especially when we're talking about phonology and when we're talking about those components of language and kids are able to hear the phonology, they're able to do it. And then they also go ahead and try it on their own, right? So good instruction, small group experiences are so incredibly important. These are just, I'm going to go into some strategies for a little bit and then make some other linguistic comparisons just real quick, right? So the idea of pairing a more proficient speaker of English with one who is less proficient, all right, is always a good idea. Not so far apart in levels of proficiency, but a little bit closer so that one does not overpower the other. The intent is for our English learner to always be hearing correct use of the language. And these are some additional strategies to facilitate receptive language, all right? So I am talking and talking and talking, describing what I am doing as a teacher, explaining what I am doing as a teacher. I am taking these 8 ounces of water and I'm placing them in this beaker so that I can heat up the beaker over the open flame or whatever the case may be. All right. Or perhaps teacher is describing what the student is doing, so that it all depends on the level of language proficiency. And these are actually good strategies to be using with young children, period. All right. Or recasting, correcting what the child might say and providing a correct model, or expanding what the child might say to add more adjectives or add more adverbs to these simple sentences, and always adding an opportunity for writing as well, all right? So I will provide a copy of this PowerPoint so you can also have it and take a look at it. So immersing our English learner in language the entire day, these lexical qualities of words are so important. Being able to identify the phonology of the word. How do I say it? How many syllables are in that word? Are there any phonemes in this word that I need to bring out to their attention. What about the orthography? What am I going to connections I'm going to make between that that sound parking space and the graphing that goes with it? And is there any confusion, as you're going to see here right now? All right. So I do want to allow though children to have this overgeneralization as they use their language, and then read alouds continue to be very important as we develop language. So I bring this up because of, regardless of the age, I still need to be working on that language development. That is the foundation period as I then move into really strong literacy instruction. All right, so let me make this comparison here, all right? All right, so here I want to talk about, I'm comparing again, Spanish, but, and I'll provide you some resources. Well, actually one right now, before I forget, it's, I wrote it down here, yeah. One that's very common and that provides you lots of great information is website is mylanguages.org. mylanguages.org is a very good website. It's free, has many languages listed, will identify the alphabet, sentence structure. One of the best curricula that I've seen is language, that does a lot of cross-linguistic transference and makes some really good connections. So we're getting a lot better in those areas. So understanding how might the native language, for example, conflict or cause some cognitive dissonance is very, very important. Remember, and that, let me show you what's going on here. We in English function at the phoneme level, right? We identify those sound parking spaces, and then park that grapheme in that sound parking space, right? That is what English is all about. And we strive to, and there's probably some other variations of this continuum, and you know, it's just, it kind of helps get my point across. But take a look. As I am going to working towards that level of phoneme awareness or phonemic awareness, where I'm blending, segmenting, and manipulating phonemes, the situation is that for the Spanish speaker, all right, I do get to this level of phoneme awareness, all right? So I'm making this comparison just real quick, but take a look at this. It's really interesting, all right? So in Spanish, for example, I'm very much print driven because of the transparency of the orthography. So realize that. What about the child's native language, especially if he or she reads and writes in that native language? You know, you have in Connecticut some dual language programs. You have in Connecticut some bilingual programs as well. That means that you have children who are learning to read and write in Spanish. All right. So in Spanish, though, we are very much print to speech rather than speech to print. Okay. So here I have, this is not a problem, right? Not a problem. Oh, here's a problem. Here's the letter A, and my letter A sounds like a short O. All right. All right. So this, I combine these two. So my M is my A is right? Ma. My M remains the same. My E is very similar to in English and in Spanish, right? So ma is, M-A is ma, M-E is me. And now I begin decoding almost immediately. So I'm no longer at the phonemic awareness level. Now I am working at a syllable level, and now I've got print. So I am going to blend ma. I'm going to blend me, mo. I'm going to blend me, ma. And suddenly I am now blending at the syllable level. All right. And I'm blending almost immediately. And it's pretty easy because my vowels are so consistent. So I can do the same thing with P, right? Very similar sound, but my A is like a short O. So it's ba, be, right? So I have ba, be. There you go. Ba, be. So you can see already the confusion that's going to occur right here, right? So now I am going to be decoding it. Papa, papi, ipa, mapa, so forth and so on. So forth and so on. All right. Just a quick lesson. All right. Now, it doesn't take long before this Spanish speaker is now back at the syllable level. And this is why many folks say that Spanish is syllabic. Spanish is not really syllabic. Syllabic in linguistics means that there's a symbol that represents an entire syllable. But I understand what folks are saying, because in English, we are manipulating phonemes. In Spanish, we are manipulating syllables. All right, so suddenly all this area right here is missing. All right, so realize that now, even though, for example, in those schools where we do have Spanish speakers and the kiddos may be reading and writing in Spanish, they're really manipulating syllables, and they're reading and writing at a syllable level. All right, and now we have to ensure that they are back at the phoneme level. All right. Now, this is where my work with Kid Lips came into play, and this is where it really, it was just an amazing findings. All right, let me show you something just real quick. And again, I realize that I'm comparing Spanish and English, realizing that I want you to go ahead and take these elements and apply them globally, and realize that, oh my gosh, I need to be very explicit about the instruction, especially at the phoneme level, and what is it that is occurring. I might have, if you'd have a Spanish speaker, for example, I might have the same letter, the same sound, but watch this, right? Here are my stops. Here's one set. Here's my alveolar set. Here's my bilabial. Here's my third set. Here's my velar set. All right. So I have my and g. All right. And in English, yes, I have in the initial, like I have it in the initial position and in the final position. All right. And there's also medial. All right. But watch, in Spanish, I only have it in the initial position. I've never had to, as a Spanish speaker and reader and writer of Spanish, which I was when I started school, I had never heard this sound in the final position because I don't have it. So it's so important that regardless of what the native language is, realize that, well, why is it that they're not getting it? I've said it over and over again. Well, it could be that I've never heard it there before, and I still need to hear it over and over and over again, and need to practice that as well, all right? The same thing with the book. In the initial, in the final, in the initial in Spanish, no final, all right? So the same thing with my initial, final in English, but in Spanish, only the initial, no final. And the same thing can be said for these phonemes over here as well. So I have them, all right? And so I might have them in my native language, but I've never heard them in these positions, and now what, right? Now, just as an FYI, what about, letters that might be similar, for example, between English and Spanish? Yes, I have a D. Yes. Yeah, I have the letter D in Spanish as well. But in Spanish, it doesn't sound like an alveolar D as it does in English. It's more of an interdental. The tongue is between my teeth. All right. And then it can be right behind my front teeth or in the middle of my front teeth, right? Yikes. So here,
why is it that the kiddo who's trying to say day keeps on saying they, right? As in T-H-E-Y. He's confusing the position of my tongue, all right? So in English, the D is an alveolar, the tip of the tongue is up, right by the alveolar ridge. But in Spanish, it sounds more like an interdental. Either the tongue is going to be right behind my upper set of front teeth or between my teeth, right? Let me show you this. So if I take my nasals, it's the same thing, all right? The exists in both languages, but only in the initial position in Spanish, but never in the final. All right, unless it's an indigenous word in Spanish, and those are few and far between. My alveolar and is really cool, not a problem. And then this is only in a medial position in Spanish, and it's not really considered a phoneme in Spanish. It's just considered an allophone. So I don't want you to get lost in the weeds here. The issue is that I might have these phonemes, right, in my native tongue, but when we're talking about position as to where they are articulated, that is probably not an issue. I've never said them there before. I've never had to articulate. And I'm just going to, as far as consonants, I want to stop it with my fricatives. Look at all these, take a look at all these blank spaces here. Remember what I said, in English, I have 44. In Spanish, I have about half as many. All right, cool. So, although some of these, like the letter Z, exist in Spanish, but it's not. There's no Z. It's not the same as in English. It is pronounced as a voiceless fricative. Yeah, alveolar fricative. So you can see all these blank spaces that there isn't anything that's going to transfer over because it just simply does not exist in my native tongue. All right, and notice how I said the voiced th, right? That interdental voiced fricative, this one right here. Yeah, that will transfer over, but look, it transfers over as a letter D. All right. So that's been our quest as far as with kid lips, trying to explain some of these confusions, or simply, if the phoneme does not exist, then kids are going to try what's nearest in their phonological lexicon, right? All right. So I'm going to finish up with this and not go into too much detail because I wanted to have a little bit of time for if there are any questions. Here's our vowel valley. All right. So we state that English has 18 plus 1, right? 18 vowels. Here's my one, my schwa. All right. Spanish has only 5. And that's it. And they're always a, e, I, o, u. And although if you're teaching and if the child has learned about syllable types, they exist in Spanish, but they are only there for categories, for identifying the syllable orthographically. They do nothing, has nothing to do with vowels, with the actual sound, because they're always the same. Now watch. Okay, here we've taken our vowels. All right, watch. That is a in Spanish. All right. I coded it yellow because the sound transfers over, but guess what? The grapheme is going to cause an issue. All right. So that's that. Right. Watch. A. I quoted it green because the sound transfers as does the grapheme. Yay! This one has a broken line. Why? Because there's going to be some area of confusion. All right. The E sound, that phoneme E exists in Spanish, but check this out. It's represented by an I. Uh-oh. All right. Here's my O. It's also a broken up line. Why? Because in Spanish, the letter O is O. In English, the long O is O. And Spanish is O. I don't move anything. Confusion. And then the last one is U, and that's a solid line. Why? Because that sound does exist in Spanish, and so does that grapheme. There you go. These are my five vowel phonemes in Spanish. That's it. What about the rest? Okay, watch this. I have diphthongs, but they're going to be represented differently as far as graphemes. The sound transfers, the grapheme may not. Same thing with ow. The long A, I have that sound. The grapheme, nope, it's a different grapheme. The long I have that grapheme, I have that sound, not the grapheme. That doesn't exist. 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 Get where I'm going here? All right. So of all those vowel phonemes, only 2 transfer without any kind of problem. Voice, the phoneme itself, and the grapheme. Everything else is going to be major confusion, or
the phoneme simply does not even exist in Spanish. So I tell you, colleagues, as we're working with English learners, be aware that yes, we're doing double the cognitive work, and I have to learn these, and I have a tendency to really produce something that is similar to this new sound that I am making. And this is why it's so important to also, I'm not saying anything about correction. I am saying that we have to be explicit enough to explain how the phoneme is articulated. We don't want perfection right off the bat. We do want correct articulation that will come with time. So explaining how this sound is made is incredibly important. So colleagues, here are some, and I'm finishing up here. These are some resources that you'll have available, or that are available, that I really, really enjoy when we're working with English learners. IES has a plethora, has so many neat resources on their website that you can also be utilizing. And as I mentioned, mylanguages.org, language has great cross-linguistic notations, and we're getting a whole lot better. We're getting a whole lot better as far as identifying what transfers and what does not. And you have to realize then is it really a learning difference, or is it that we are still working on the acquisition of the language, and especially be mindful of how is the native language then causing some conflict or dissonance as I'm learning my new language of English. So hopefully some of my takeaways are that, the more we know, the better we teach. Be quite aware that our ELs are doing double the cognitive work, and be mindful that words do have stories to tell from a phonological, orthographic, semantics, and syntax area, but realize that phonology and orthography are going to be tough, especially when you're talking from an orthographic standpoint, from a language that is perhaps very transparent to a language, orthography in English, which is quite difficult, but it's still very doable. So try to learn as much as you can about the student's native language, and understand, or kind of get an idea of what he or she may be struggling with as they're trying to not only acquire the language, and don't get confused with that, acquire the language, but also develop the reading and writing skills that are going to be necessary. So colleagues, again, here is my email address, my phone number. Please let me know how I can help. And it's a complex, very challenging situation working with English learners. But really, seriously, the more that we know about our linguistic values, especially in English, and get a little idea of what the native language is all about, the better able you are going to scaffold that, be able to scaffold that instruction. So I'm going to turn it over back to Amy or Nancy. Nancy, perhaps. All right.
Yeah, Nancy's
And
going to
see
take
if
it.
there's anything that we need to take care of.
Well, first of all, thank you. I almost think I could understand how to learn Spanish after tonight's session. That was pretty remarkable. Thank you for that on a personal level.
You're welcome.
But I would like to open it up if you can spend a couple more minutes. If anyone has a question, can you take up? I see a hand up. Rachel, why don't you
Yes.
unmute?
Hi.
Hi.
Rachel.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a retired bilingual special ed teacher, Spanish being the second language, which I acquired living in Mexico for 3 years and also minoring in Spanish. And
Wonderful. Yeah.
it's something I absolutely love. I love working with the kids, working with the incredible, devoted bilingual teachers who really care about their kids. So thank you. And everything that you were talking about, of course, is already a part of me. I really loved it. And I'm wondering, I had some questions prepared, but something came to me while you were talking that actually kind of takes precedence over my prepared questions, which is something I observed over the years with my kids. I guess I'll ask this first and then the second question. So many of the kids, I retired from an inner city situation where our Spanish speakers come from everywhere, and many of them didn't have education in the first place where they came from because they were dealing with extreme like violence or other situations.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the first issue. But then when they start learning how to communicate orally and then try to transfer it, I mean, given doing all the basics of the phonetics and the phonemic awareness, the syntax to me seems to be the key issue in helping them really grasp content and what they're. Does that make sense to you? And how do you see it? I mean, what do you recommend for actually approaching syntax in a way that they'll get it?
Yeah, actually, syntax is a challenge, and many times, even with just regular our general ed kiddos, are missing a lot of that type of instruction. So it goes back to not taking anything for granted and being very systematic about the instruction of how does syntax work, realizing that if we get any information as to the syntax of a child's native language, then that is also going to help describe why perhaps this child may be struggling a little bit more with syntax or what I have to do differently. So you may have some languages where you have the adjective that comes before the noun, or in others that the adjective has to come after the noun. So realizing those differences and being very explicit and not taking anything for chance, explaining how the language works. So I'm talking about sentence frames. I am talking about sentence anagrams. I am talking about sentence expanders, expansion activities, and starting from one kernel sentence that I can go ahead and build on from there, and adding vocabulary as I'm talking about that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's all we can't be doing it in silos. It's all going to be interconnected.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Rachel. And maybe we can, since in the interest of time, maybe we'll come back to you and let's have the other person whose hand is raised ask the next question if we could. Thank you, Rachel. You're up. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name.
Say Yadid?
Hi, my name is Yadid. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I am from Oklahoma. Well, actually, I am from Mexico. I was a teacher in Mexico before I came in to Oklahoma. So I just started working in Oklahoma school like a teacher assistant. And my principal offered me the position to help ELs in my school. So I'm working with pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade ELs. Most or almost all of them are Hispanic people. So this year, I have an open mind because Oklahoma offer letters for the teachers in Oklahoma. So I take my first year in letters, and I get a grant in my school for buy me all the stuff for tools for reading. So I get my picture cards, I get my mirrors, and that changed the way I can teach my kids. I am very amazed how this works for my kids. We just repeat the things the teacher
Yeah.
or the other people in English says. But
Yeah.
now we can say how the mouth can be, how the
Yeah.
tongue can go. And that's not working only for my kids. That's working for me too.
Yeah.
I just
Good.
pronounce the things in Spanish like they do. And I don't understand the combination for the vowels before I see these materials. So thank you so much for everything
Oh.
you do for the kids, because that year helped my kids a lot. And it's easy because they just start to learn English because they just start speaking in Spanish at home, but they don't read, they don't writing. So
Uh-huh.
the big thing is talk. And
Yeah.
then in my school first time, they just learned the name of the letter. But now with me, they can pronounce the letter, they
Yeah.
can see the formation in the mouth, they can see how they sound, they can see his own mouth in the mirror. So this
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah, that just warms my heart. Thank you so much. And you know, and it's just so important that we don't store the acoustic signal per se. What we store are the articulatory features or the articulatory gestures that go into making that phoneme, making that sound. So that was the intent of Kid Lips, and I'm glad that it helped your kids. I'm glad that it's helping you as well.
Yeah.
And then we're also on the verge of I'm finishing up the sound walls for our Spanish speakers. So we're going to do something similar for Spanish.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I try to just teach English because they are enough with the Spanish.
No,
But it's the big thing I can explain in Spanish what they don't understand, or I can compare
Yeah, right.
when they don't get the vocabulary and they say, I don't know what that words mean, I can say, that is this in Spanish. And they say, oh, that's
yeah.
that. So it's easy for me, but I have a Chinese kid this year, and that's really hard for me explain what does that mean, but he get it so fast too.
And I'm glad it sounds like you're really providing a good structured English immersion program.
Yes.
And I'm all for that too. I mean, if there is no opportunity for a bilingual type program, and I get that because we may not have the staff, the next best thing is a good, solid, structured English immersion program. I'll take one of those over a cruddy bilingual program any day.
Right.
But I know that you would be a great bilingual teacher, but if you don't have the material, then it seems like you're providing some very good structure.
Yes.
So thank you. Reach out. Let me know if you need anything, because we go to Oklahoma a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
gracias.
Rachel, is there another question you'd like to ask before we call it a night and let Antonio go back to his family?
Yes, a brief question. Do you have any particular tools that you like to use to screen our English language learners for their literacy readiness in both languages, so we can, you know, compare and
Yes, and you know what, and I'm all for screening in the native language if the instruction has not been provided in English. If the instruction has been provided in English, then we're going to test in English. All right. We have to be mindful of what type of instruction has been provided, though.
right.
But if the instruction is in English, then we use that screener, or we use whatever assessment in English. But if you're going to do the, you know, Spanish has a lot, and I can't speak for any other assessments or screeners. But one of my favorite is goes along with ¿cómo se llama? With DIBELS, los indicadores dinámicos del éxito de la lectura. And I think Ames Web has one as well that is pretty good, that can be used. So those are some of the, I know I have written down somewhere, Ames Web, I forget which one. It's a really lengthy name. But anyway, so I like IDEL. Texas Lee has a good one too. It translates to Texas Reads, but it can be given with TPRI, which is the English version of that screener. So IDEL, IDEL, the Ames Web version, Texas Lee, also in Spanish. And then Core has some really neat little screeners that can be used as well.
Oh, thank you so much for everything. This was fabulous. I wish every teacher in Connecticut were able to hear it.
You're so kind. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to make the recording available, spread the word. And Antonio, we had a question in the chat while you were answering Rachel's, if possibly we can get the PowerPoint. Is that possible?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah,
wonderful.
absolutely. Yes.
Okay, well,
I will have that PowerPoint made available. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can't thank you enough. As I said, I think this was eye-opening on so many levels about our own state, about our the Spanish language. Was just wonderful, and it's such a pleasure to be spending the evening with you. So we thank you, and I think Amy will hit the button to end the recording, and then, or somebody will, I hope, and we'll make this available to our membership. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the school year.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night now.